We aren't in Gospel of or Genesis yet, but we will next week be into that series. So we thought we'd remind you of that. So there's an opportunity, there's books here, and there's a good chance to connect with other people. So we hope that you would do that. Is the next slide blank? No, it isn't. I need to do my story here, I guess. Today's sermon is just a testimony of Scripture, of what it speaks to us. Psalm 142 is a psalm of lament, crying out to the Lord in times of trouble. I don't know what the lady's crying about, but it looks sincere. It looks real. I envision that she's at seminary hating her studies. That's what I saw. The books in the background. She's just saying, God, how can I get through this? When I was elementary school for my town was kindergarten through 6th grade. And I remember being a first grader hearing swear words that I've never heard before, thinking I will never be as big as those 6th graders. They were playing kickball, having a fight, and I thought, I will never be that big. Wow. When you get to the upper class of elementary school in my town at Roosevelt Elementary, when you're a 4th grade boy, the 6th grade boys invite you, challenge you, to come out to the playground, to the dirt field, and cross the dirt field. It's a game of tag. You cross the field, and all the 6th grade boys tackle you. I wasn't too convinced I wanted to do this, but there was no choice. I had to do this. The 4th graders running across the dirt field, and I know there's 80 of us and 100 of them, and I figured, well, they can't catch all of us. So I tried to stay in the middle of the pack, and it was a horrible experience. I still remember it like yesterday. It must be trauma, I guess. We ran across the field, and the 6th graders came and tackled us all and pulled us down, and you look back, and the dust was rising. It looked like Gettysburg. Just like the dust is rising with bloody 4th graders spread out all over the place, and they're all like, and the 6th graders are cheering, "You'll never be as big as us," you know. And then when we went in from recess, the 4th graders were the ones that got yelled at for being dirty and like, "What were you doing out there?" Like, we were innocent, challenged to this horrible place, calling out to the Lord in times of trouble. Today's psalm struck a pace with me. There's one particular verse that just jumped out at me, and I'd like to walk through this together. Not sure where you're at. I know all of us have challenges. Karen just prayed for them. All of us are in a place. When are we going to call out to the Lord? All of us are in a place. When are we going to decide to call out to the Lord and ask for his rescue? Let's go to Psalm 142. NIV is my version, but we're going to look at a couple different translations just to see what it looks like. The psalm is unique. A bunch of David psalms show up at the very end of the book of Psalms. It's very strange because most of the David songs are in book 1 and 2. But right at the end there, from 138 to 145, whoever put the Psalms together put all the David Psalms. And this one has the longest heading and the most precise heading, so it's a kind of a gift. It's not a verse in our versions, but it's also probably not divinely inspired, but it's a note that the editor put there. And the heading says this: a maskil of David. Maskil is some sort of word, we're not quite sure, but it seems to be like an illustration, a short story of a pious person with a point. That's kind of what we think maskil stands for. He's not king yet when he wrote this, but of course he's probably king when they published it, but it's most probably just this idea of a song or a poem speaking of wisdom. It's a teaching song. It also adds this incredible detail: when David was in the cave. We have 2 cave stories of David, one in 1 Samuel 22, he's alone. It's in the earlier part of Saul's pursuing him, you see. Well, let's go back to why. In 1 Samuel 18, Saul is king, David is the young guy, and he defeats Goliath. And the song, the jingle in the land, the rap song that was popular back then was Saul kills 100, David kills thousands. And in 1 Samuel 18, we get a clue into the jealousy of King Saul, and he's angry about this. Hundreds, thousands. So he begins pursuing Saul. In fact, he has a breakdown right there at that moment and throws a knife or a sword at him or something, a spear. So in 22, we see David in a cave, and he's really alone. and his family hears about it and comes and helps him. But in chapter 24 of 1 Samuel, David's in another cave. This time he's deep into the cave with 600 men. It's a very huge cave, and he's hiding as Saul's army is pursuing him. Saul is also in the cave at that moment. He comes in the cave, and David's full of fear. That's what we think this story, the setting of this story is. Saul has 3,000 men. David has hundreds. You see, the lyric has been flipped. Instead of I kill thousands, you kill hundreds, now it's no, you've got thousands and I've got hundreds. Incredible place of, wow, I'm in danger here. I'm in a place of fear. And what do you do when you're trapped in a cave? You write a prayer. And that's where we find David, written probably years after from his traumatic memory episode. The enemy is overwhelming, and he doesn't push the point that he's pious, but that's the normal type of lament, that he's innocent, and these other evil people are after him. And what it proves is that the Lord is faithful. This is called a lament psalm. And what is a lament? It's a particular style of scripture. There's a whole bunch of them. There's whole books, Lamentations and a half of Jeremiah, and a really good portion of the Psalms. The Psalms that are labeled as lament is like 39 of the 150, so that's like 25% of the Psalms of words of people crying out to God are of this form, lament. And maybe another fourth of them, so 50% of the Psalms have some sort of lament, some portion where they grieve, they pour out to God, and they grieve to God. So what a lament is an expression of grief or sorrow, expressing pain, but it also is reaching for hope. A good lament will have pain and all this sorrow. We get a truth about what is going on, but you always find a glimmer of hope and people reaching out to God who can help them. The psalmist is said to have remembered what they've learned about God and what he's done in the past. And then a good lament will declare that for the present and the future. I remember what you did. I remember your great works. Be with me now in this terrible place of fear and pain. Usually the point or the destination of laments are confidence in God's trustworthiness. It's a nice race. We don't just simply wallow in our difficulties. We come to a place where we express confidence in God's trustworthiness. Most laments have 4 parts. There's some sort of turning or deciding. There's the complaint itself. This life stinks. And then there's usually a point of asking for rescue. A lament does address the situation. I'm asking for rescue. When I was crossing the field and the 6th graders were coming, it had to be Scotty Nelson. Of all the kids, he was always my bully. Why did he pick me? It's like he picked me out of the 80 kids. Bam! I just prayed out to God, please help me. There's a point of asking, and then there's always this confession of trust, it's called. I didn't know this existed. There's a confession of trust, even in a lament. They're not always in the same order. Maybe a particular lament doesn't have all 4 of these. But the important thing, that a lament is to the Lord. A lament isn't just bearing my burdens and look at me, woe's pity, oh, my life's so hard. A lament is just looking for hope, reaching out for hope. And it's to the Lord. Because I've got good news and bad news, people. The good news is the Lord cares for you deeply. And the bad news is the universe does not care for you at all. There's this new manifestation idea. I guess I didn't know much about it. I'd heard hints of it. When I talk to people who talk about energies and they quote the universe is looking after me, and it always kind of bugged me a little bit. But I researched it more this week as I came across it again. And it's one good thing. It's a good thing to acknowledge that positive thoughts and gratitude will help people succeed. We need to have positive thoughts and gratitude. And fear and negativity, negative self-talk, of course, will doom us, and it's harmful. Our mind is very powerful, and we must figure out a way to think success and to dream, bigger and get beyond our fears. Yet, the idea of invoking the universe's care for us is a whole other thing to claim. And this is what they claim. This is called manifestation. Is that there's energy in the universe, and if we align our own energy with the positive energy of the universe through speaking out what we want, manifestation, if we make our good vibrations match the vibrations of the universe will take care of us. In fact, the universe will test our will and resolve, and then, in a sense, meet our whatever we demand. And it's just crazy stuff. It's crazy stuff. And of course applies to anything you want. You want a new relationships, you want more money, you need a new career. They teach you, just learn the correct form of invoking or manifesting truth, positive truth. You just claim it, and if you really believe it, it will happen because the universe will grant you. And I can't disagree more, the idea that the universe cares for us or tests us or anything like that. Oprah and her crazy people, somebody wrote a book in 2006 where manifest became a big deal, and Oprah pushed it. And she simply says, the only thing, let me make sure the quote is right. We just have to remove obstacles and limiting beliefs in our lives. The only thing stopping you from manifesting your dreams is you. That's this mantra that the universe cares for you. Let me tell you. We need to tap the power of God, the Creator. Our positive thoughts are powerful and helpful, but we need extra help. When 100 sixth graders are looking down on you to kill you, you need extra, more than ourselves, because life is overwhelming and some tragedies are incredibly debilitating. We need each other, and we need the Lord, Creator of the universe, to change us and change our situations. That's why we turn to Scripture. That's why we turn to the Lord. Because in the darkness of the universe, we need something greater than ourselves. And as Christians, it's Yahweh. It's Adonai. It's Jesus Christ, His Son. Let's get to the Scriptures. The first step of Psalm 142 is the first step of a lament. The decision to cry out. The NIV says the two verses and doesn't really do it justice, but here it is. I cry out to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. This is lament language. Everybody sees it right away. Aha, the crying out, the lifting up my voice. I'm pleading for mercy is even better. And the ESV does it better because they don't disturb the Hebrew chiasm or the Hebrew structure. Here's the real structure of it all. With my voice, I cry out to the Lord. With my voice, it's the second part starts the same. I plead for mercy to the Lord. I don't know why that's appealing to me, but I like to see the structure. I like to see that it's a poem and it's got structure and it's a decision to use our voice and speak to God. There's tons of decisions in the Old Testament. There's tons of decisions in our lives. Adam and Eve decided to embrace the fruit. Moses decided to investigate the burning bush. Joshua decided to tell the people, as for me and my house, we believe in the Lord. Samuel made decisions. David made decisions. People make decisions to seek the Lord. And the question for you and I, in the midst of the difficulties, are you ready to cry out? Or are you just going to do this by yourself? How much longer will this burden be only yours? Are we ready to decide to come and plead to the Lord? The second verse in this portion is, I pour out before him my complaint. Before him I tell my trouble. Again, the Hebrew text and the ESV does it so much better and shows the structure. I pour out before him my complaint. My trouble before him I declare. When you see chiasm, it's important to see the parallelism, and usually the centerpiece, the middle, is the most important. And in a lament, it's my complaint and my trouble that really matters. Getting to a point of reality where You sit down and you decide, why am I so stressed out? Why am I so depressed? Why is my life falling apart? It's facing it on head on and saying, Lord, this is my troubles. This is my complaint. And of course, we bring it to the Lord, and this is the first step of any good lamentation. The second step is this. We name the actual complaint. And he does this in verse 3 very well. First, he frames it in a sense of the discouragement. When my spirit does grow faint, it really just says, when my spirit faints within me. The NIV adds this idea of growing faint within me. It is you, God, who watch over my way. There's a big change of the God being treated as the third person and the second person. In the first verses, it was... he's talking to the assembly of people, telling people in the third person, I'm going to go to God. I'm going to go to God. So he's apparently surrounded, the prayer or the psalm, David, he's surrounded by people saying, this is what I'm going to do. And then finally in verse 3, he turns into a second person. He says, when my spirit grows faint, it's you who watch over my way. And I think that's helpful because we all know many people just like to complain. Are you ever going to do anything about it? Are you ever going to go to God? Or you just like to complain? Like, point to the person. No, don't do that. People just like the idea of the struggles that they have. Eventually, the decision to go to God goes to God. Where is it? Where's the half-hour time of laying down, prostrate before God? Forgive me, bless me, give me mercy. That's really going to God. Where is the time when you pull off the road and you go to the park and you go for a walk and say, Lord, I want to acknowledge your presence. I'm lost. We actually go to the Lord and talk to him in the second person, like directly to him, because we know he watches over our way. This verse is tremendously translated different ways. Let me find it here. Faint means overwhelmed. In the Message Bible, it says, I sink in my despair. And when you watch over my way, some of the translations say, you know my way. A couple of them say, you know my ways. Watch over me. The Message Bible says, you know how I'm feeling. I think all four of those different versions really tell me something different. So I don't want to build a theology just on one translation. I want to look at multiple ones and say, what's the crux of this? Do you know me? Do you know what I'm going through? If we're going to confess trust in God, if we're going to lean on him, we first have to acknowledge he knows what's going on. Psalm 139, which is in this section, 38, 39, 40, 41, 142. So these are a collection. I've never seen psalms that are connected more than these 7. They really are a theme, and it's really well done. Usually psalms are independent. But this one, in Psalm 139, that famous passage, you have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. That's David, and that's him right here, acknowledging you know what I'm going through. The verse continues, on the road or on the path where I walk, and this is his complaint. You know this, God. On the road or the path where I walk, people have hidden a snare for me, or a trap might be a better word. A trap. It's visioned as a small trap for birds that would snap shut and trap the bird. And this is the idea that the word uses. People are out there, and they might not have us in mind. But we all know there's so many traps, and there's so many snares. I can't tell you how many viruses and ridiculous calls from people who are completely lying. I'm starting to yell at them now. Stop lying for a living. Do you know? There's a perfect verse. I can't remember where it was. I couldn't find it again. There's a perfect verse. Oh, liar, don't you know that God knows what you're doing? He will not be deceived. I'd be like, I want to read you scripture. Stop calling me. My house isn't for sale. Jeez. I said $1 million once, and they stopped calling me. We must realize that there are snares out there in the world. People trying to trap us, steal our money, capture our attention. This is his first complaint. His second one, he's talking to God. Now look and see. There's nobody on my right, is really what it says. There's nobody on my right. And NIV adds the phrase hand, which is very helpful. There was nobody on my right hand, because soldiers would carry their shield on their left and then their sword. But they would carry their shield, but they're exposed on the right. So having another soldier next to them with a shield is the protection we're seeking. There's nobody on my right. I'm all alone. Both situations in the cave, David was alone in the first one, and then he apparently ventured out. The 600 men hid, and as Saul entered, David had this great idea to go over there and prove his piousness, prove his fidelity by not killing Saul. There's nobody on my right hand. No one is concerned for me. Isn't it despair when we feel alone? There's snares out there, and now I'm alone dealing with the snare. And his third complaint is, I have no refuge. No one cares for me. He truly is alone. The refuge verse is actually, I have no escape or I have no refuge. It actually is the phrase, my refuge has disappeared. So he had a refuge, a cave. And now Saul enters the cave, and now the cave is a trap. It's interesting how much of our self-remedies, I've got all this stress, I'm going to do this behavior, I'm going to try this thing, and that self-remedy in turn becomes a trap. It's just a never-ending cycle. I've got these ideas, I'm just going to drink more, I'm just going to party more, I'm going to go out and whatever, fill in the blank. And our self-remedies, our escapes, are not refuge. They are traps also, quite often. I have no refuge. It's interesting that the word refugees comes straight from that phrase. People looking for refuge. People in South America, Central America, in Mexico, wherever they are, in Europe, all over the world, Africa, refugees. Their world is so dangerous, they seek another country for help and protection. I worked in a wilderness camp in New York in my 2 college summers in the middle, and it was all outdoors. It was all guys, it was all outdoors, and it was hiking, marginally long trips with little guys. And they taught us how to build a refuge or how to build a lean-to. I'd never heard of the idea, but to protect yourself from the elements, you would build a lean-to. And it's very powerful. You have to make sure you face it the right way. But look at this one. The only place that's dry is in the refuge. The only place that's protected from the snow. And they line it with elements that reflect heat, and it changes the whole experience. And once in a while, you would find a pre-built one, and the counselor would say, this is for the adults, you kids stay out in the woods. And it'd be a dream to live in this type of thing, to find a pre-built refuge. Our ancestors who came to America built these things first. Little mud huts to live in on the side of the hill before they built the homes. Lord, the question is, am I ready to decide to talk to the Lord? And the question for each one of us, are we alone? Are you completely alone? Because if you're there, you're in the cave, hiding from the world, are you ready to decide to talk to God about it? Are you ready to not be alone any longer? Are you overwhelmed? I found out just this morning that the praise songs on 88.5, Life 88.5, are listed, the recently played for a couple. You can go back a few hours and find the song that you heard. I didn't know that it happened. Because sometimes the praise songs just strike perfectly. My wife and I have found that usually when I'm in trouble, the lyrics of the songs that I don't like all of a sudden become amazing. It happened to us 10 years ago, the worst part of our lives. And the songs that, oh, come on, get some new songs, we need some more variety on 88.5. And then when you're in the depths, in the darkness, you realize, wow, all along he's been saying these great words, and all of a sudden they become significant. Don't let your cave, the place that you escape to, alone, pretend to be your refuge. We can't hide from the challenges that life gives us. He then, so here's the complaint, 3 parts. There's snares, no one's concerned, and I have no place to hide. And finally comes the second confession of trust. I don't know if you saw the first one, but 142:5 stands as a lament. Here is the jewel. I've got all these problems. I've decided to complain, and here is the jewel of my faith. I cry out to you, Yahweh, Adonai. I cry out to you, Jesus. I say, you are my refuge. I just said I have no refuge. You are my refuge. You are my portion in the land of the living. You're the one. When I'm hiding in the cave, you're with me. When I'm running off in the woods, when I'm sleeping in bed, whatever your refuge is, whatever it might be, the place that you hide and escape. And there's plenty of good ones and some marginal ones. Solitude might be your refuge. Shopping. Reading books. I just find refuge in reading books. So good. Videos, music. For me, it's music for sure. I kind of figured that out this week. Like, wow. I always look to music when I want to cheer up. It might be your bed. My refuge is my bed. It might be coffee on the deck. Nothing wrong with that, maybe. It might be Bible reading as my refuge. Well, what I'm saying is, bring God into that place, or at least acknowledge that God is in that place of refuge. That it's not me alone hiding, it's God is there. God is there. You are my refuge. My portion in the land of the living. A portion is kind of a reference to when they divided up the Holy Land. Joshua crossed the river and everybody got a chunk of land. That's their portion, their inheritance. Your tribe gets this land. You are my portion, my inheritance. You are the valuable thing that I get while I'm alive on this earth. That is the best way to complain. The best way to lament is to get to the point. I'll decide, I will label my complaints, I will deal with reality, how alone I feel, and then I find God. Psalm 77 couldn't be done better. I need to read a big portion of it. I remember you, God, and I groaned. So here the person's turned to God and they got worse. I remember you and I groaned. I meditated and my spirit grew faint. This is Psalm 77. Sleepless nights. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. Couldn't even share it with my spouse, how down I was. I thought about the former days, the years long ago, and I remembered my songs at night. I used to sing to you. My heart meditated, but I asked these 6 hard questions. This is Psalm 77, 6 hard questions, and the answer to every one of these questions is a capital N-O. No! But this is where he was. Will the Lord reject forever? I'm at verse 7. Will he never show his favor again? Didn't that sound like despair? God's against me. This is never going to get better. Has his unfailing love vanished forever? Has his promise failed for all time? No! Verse 9, has God forgotten to be merciful? Has he in anger withheld his compassion? These are questions of despair, and some of us are there now. And some of us get there at different points in life. And I thought and I said, no, wait, I'm going to remember the years that you stretch out your hand. I'm going to remember the deeds that you did. I'll remember the miracles. I will consider all your works and meditate on your mighty deeds. Verse 12. Wow, it's apparently lament has an answer. Lament has an answer. Elizabeth Elliot says it this way. Where does your security lie? Is God your refuge, your hiding place, your stronghold? Is God your shepherd and your counselor, or is your own wisdom? Is God your friend and your redeemer, the one who pays your debt? Is he your savior and your guide? Because if he is, you don't need to search any farther for security. Wow. Thank you, Elizabeth Elliot. She wrote, I don't know when these words were, but she wrote that famous book, In the Shadow of the Almighty, when her husband, Jim, and 4 colleagues were killed doing missions work in tribes in Ecuador. The reason Jim Elliot is famous is because Elizabeth is this profound writer who spent another 50 years of ministry sharing the story of God's faithfulness, even to a husband who was martyred. If God is your refuge, what are we looking? If He's our security, what are we looking for anything more? Finally, he ends with the rescue request. Listen to my cry. 3 things. Listen to my cry, and then he says, why? Because I'm in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me. Why? Because they're too strong for me. No one can stand up to 6th graders who are blood in their veins trying to kill us, put us in our place. And finally, the verse that struck me and changed my month. Set me free from my prison, that I might praise your name. He turns here. No more complaints. Set me free from my prison. My goodness, is that beautiful. Literally, it's just set me free from prison. Set me free from this cave I'm trapped in, or Saul pursuing me. But the introduction of the word my, NIV took liberty, is so powerful. Because each and every one of us has our prisons. Some we created, most of us were put upon, the prison was put upon us. Our health restrictions, our financial difficulties, a broken relationship, broken life. Many of us have just been dealt a prison. And the cry of lament is, set me free, God, set me free from my prison. I just found that to be beautiful. The very last phrase shows the rescue. Then the righteous will gather around me, about me. He's referring back to Jonathan, who'd come and his family came and rescued him, and they loved him, Then the righteous will gather around me because of your goodness. In the future, your goodness you will give to me. That's definitely a future verse. Wow, that's hope. That's hope. My friends, I ask you this. Are you in the point of lament? Are you ready to decide to talk to God and turn to God? Can you list your complaints? Straightforward, be honest. Where do I fall short? Where does my life fall short? Can you request rescue from God, the only one who can fix these things? And will it be grounded in a confession of trust? Probably the hardest thing my wife and I dealt with, one of the hardest things we dealt with is our youngest child was 3 years old, and he had a big seizure a week, 2 seizures in a week. One of them was during church. I was in the second row, and he was in the front row, and Karen was singing on stage, and all of a sudden, our boy was shaking violently. It was like, what the heck is this? What is he doing? And I grabbed him and ran out the back, and we assembled over there, and I'm telling you, it lasted minutes, right? And of course, it's a seizure, but why, And those people who sat in that foyer area, I will never forget who they were, and the love and the care. And he's shaking. Will you stop shaking? And the couple girls, high school girls, were in the youth group. I was 30. No, I was 40. High school girls in the youth group were there, and we called the ambulance and all that. And my goodness, those were dark times, Another big one with Karen in a store. And then we became that family who has to go to the hospital with the sick kids. And, he looked normal, but we're at the cancer clinic and the heart, what all the Children's Mercy kind of place. And it was so different. And you call out to the Lord in the point of despair. And I remember the people mattered. And then, of course, the Lord's faithfulness. CJ's fine. He outgrew it, and whatever. The medicine and the stuff helped. But boy, when you're at that point, you remember who's with you. And you remember the faithfulness of the God. He cares for you deeply. He cares for you deeply in your pain, in your loneliness, in your loss. And he's the only one. He's the only one that can change it. He cares for you. Josie, he cares for you. Nilma, he cares for you. Terry, he's with you all along. David, he knows the pain you're going through. My goodness, he knows you. Karen, he loves you too. Come to the Lord Jesus. Give him your life. If you've never given your faith to Christ, if you've never said, Lord, be the king of my life, then this is the time. And if whatever your lament is, give it to the Lord. For he is worthy He is worthy.